The clock has hit 12, so let's start and then we'll see if we have some people coming in continuously. But hello, everyone that's here already, and welcome to this episode of the Urban Lunch Talk, the 50-minute city, the role of logistics. I'm Jennifer, and I work with the communications for the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership, and also have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar. Today's webinar is the last in a series of 3 where we delve into some of the critical issues of the 50-minute city. And these critical issues have been identified in our position paper on navigating the 50-minute city. And we define these issues that might affect the successful implementation of the concept and that require focused attention in the coming years. If you'd like to explore this further, you can find a link to this position paper in the chat. But in today's webinar, we will discuss the role and potentials of urban logistics. As people are expected to travel less far in the 50-minute city, the urban logistics sector will play an important role in realizing these 50-minute neighborhoods. We have with us 3 experts today on urban logistics who will discuss recent research findings and innovative solutions with us, but also reflect on some of the current challenges in the logistics sector. And I would like to welcome Philipp Müller from Fraunhofer Institute of Material Flow and Logistics, Shadi Sharif Azadeh from Delft University of Technology, and Víctor Ferran from the innovation consultancy BAX. Warm welcome to all of you. Before we begin, and you have the opportunity to introduce yourself a little further, I would just like to mention that this webinar is being recorded. We will publish this later on our YouTube channel, but also share this with everyone who participated today. I would also like to encourage you to share your thoughts, questions, comments in the chat throughout the session. We will devote some time towards the end of the webinar to answer these. With that, let's get started. And our first speaker today is Philipp Müller, who brings extensive experience in urban logistics. He's working on several research projects, one of them being the ASAP project, who received funding in JPI Urban Europe. Philipp, could you start by telling us a bit more about your background and work?
Thanks, Jennifer, for the introduction, and quite nice to hear what you already told the audience about me. As you said, Philipp Müller, my name, from Fraunhofer IML, located in Dortmund, Germany, and IML stands for Material Flow and Logistics. I'm, since 2020, a research fellow and project manager in our transportation department here at Dortmund. And our department actually is structured in 3 pillars. We've got, on the one hand side, our digital solutions team, who's taking care of route planning, for example, or how AI can be implemented. On the other hand, we've got also multimodal logistics. So they are focusing on what is happening on rail and inland waterways. And last but not least, I'm a representative of urban logistics and alternative fuels and electric mobility. And this is also the field I'm working in currently and also in the future, meaning that, like you said, Jennifer, one of the representatives of the JPI Urban Europe project, Awaken Sleeping Assets project, short ASAP, and also a representative of ULAT's Urban Logistics as an on-demand service, which were 2 European projects we are working on, which had the focus on urban logistics, solutions, and test beds and research trials that were implemented, evaluated, and now further shared to a greater audience. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Philipp. And you will have the chance to tell us more about your project soon. But let's move over to our next guest, Shadi Sharif Azadeh, who is also involved in many research projects connected to both transport and mobility. One of them being the Synergy project, which also received funding in the JPI Urban Europe call. Shadi, could you tell us a bit more about your background and work?
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me, and it's great to be here. And thanks for the introduction. As you mentioned, I work at TU Delft. So I'm an associate professor and co-director of a lab dedicated to sustainable urban multimodal mobility. I'm a mathematician by education, so my research is really focused on modeling transport systems, including passenger mobility and logistics. So currently the projects that are related to the topic of today, let's make it a bit more focused, would be Synergy. This is really the one that, because as you mentioned, this is JPI ERANET, as well as MetaCase project, which is a Horizon Europe funded project. Again, it touches upon the logistic aspect as well as spatial usage, multimodality, and then the efficiency of the multimodal logistics system. Some project is, I will talk about it a little bit when we talk about the waterway usage a bit. So this is, again, spatial usage, how we can capitalize on already existing avenues that are at disposal in some urban areas in Europe specifically. And what I do is, in general, uncertainty management, bringing it into decision, combine it with also choices, individual behavior, because at the end of the day, we do create these networks to be used by end users. In this case would be passengers or logistic users. They're all embedded in the definition of the umbrella of the 15-minute city. I would be happy to elaborate on these topics as we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Shadi, for that introduction. Last but definitely not least, we have Víctor Ferran. You work as a mobility consultant and has recently been working in a research project called ULAT, among several. Could you share a bit about your work and your perspective on today's topic?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction and for inviting me to the great panel. Yeah, as mentioned, I work at BAX. We are an innovation consultancy based in Barcelona. We work on European projects, usually European funding projects such as Horizon or Interact. And my team specializes in mobility and logistics planning. So I have a background in architecture and urban planning, and also in urban mobility planning. Before being at BAX, I worked for the mobility plan in the metropolitan area of Barcelona. And at BAX, we have been able to work in different projects, mobility related, such as automation and societal impact of mobility, but also on the topic related, many logistics projects, as you were mentioning, and also Philipp. Here we work together in the ULAT project, piloting innovative solutions in three main cities in Europe. Also, as a follow-up, because ULAT has just finished this year, we have been working on an Interact project called GLIM, focusing on policy framework and governance of city perspectives to make sure to include all stakeholders involved in the transition of green logistics in cities and make sure that small and medium enterprises can catch up with the regulations and restrictions. And lastly, we have also been working in a project that has also started this year, focusing more on the consumer behavior and the user behavior of the deliveries and returns in cities, and making sure that the user awareness is also a key aspect in terms of urban logistics.
Right. Thank you, Victor. Your projects all cover in a lot of different perspectives that I think will bring also very interesting perspectives to the discussion today. And I would like to open up the discussion now to all of you. And we know that innovative solutions are needed to meet the current challenges of urban logistics. And we will go deeper into some of these challenges later in the talk. So let's start with discussing the best practices and what innovative solutions that are being implemented in cities today. And maybe I can throw the question directly to you, Victor. If you can start with sharing some examples of innovative solutions that have emerged from your projects.
definitely. There have been some successful cases in the ULATS project, for example, that will continue after the project, and that's the ideal case for a European piloting project, that the idea continues. So one of the successful cases was one case in the city of Groningen in the Netherlands, where as many Dutch cities, or I think most of the cities, are implementing this zero emission zone in the city centers. So it is important to make sure that businesses and local entrepreneurs can catch up and can continue with their businesses as usual. So one of the pilots was to provide or to develop a platform to share a zero emission vehicle among the different entrepreneurs in the city center. And this was done thanks to the vehicle service provider and the city of Groningen and the University of Groningen, who developed the solution together. And it's a successful use case because the entrepreneurs were interested in using it, and also are interested in continuing. So there were two vehicles involved: an electric van, a zero emission electric van, and also a type of cargo bike. And in this case, the van was more successful for them, more useful. And basically, this is a successful case that is being implemented and will continue to happen. Yeah, I mean, there are other solutions, such as also in the city of Groningen, we developed together with the university and the city a parcel locker framework that the city was interested in implementing open parcel lockers in the city, so that not only private local logistics service providers would manage the parcel in the parcel lockers, but the city would have a say and would open a tender to install new parcel lockers. So we developed an analysis of best practices to install these parcel lockers in the city, and also understand where are these parcel lockers needed the most, so that the city is covered for trips of say 5 minutes walking up until 15 minutes walking, and also for bicycle trips in the area of the suburbs. This also successful case made an example of a framework that could be later being tendered to install a new parcel lockers in the city.
Yeah, thanks, Victor, for those first two good examples. I'm thinking now, Shadi, you have also focused in your project on last mile logistics. Are there any interesting findings or best practices coming from, for example, the Synergy project?
Sure. Thank you. So for this particular question, because it's about innovative solutions, right? So when it comes to innovation, I think it's very important to define what constitutes innovation. So innovation in terms of emerging technologies, because we do see now like new modes of transport are emerging into the already existing landscape, or we're talking about new methodology, or innovative methodologies that capitalize on evolving literature of data science, and then so-called AI. It's up for speculation how people define AI. But then embedding them into already existing solutions. Are we talking about capitalizing already existing data? How harmonize them, how unify them, how sharing them without jeopardizing individual private companies, confidentiality, also working with public entities. So I think this innovation has really different levels and layers, and that needs to be clearly defined. This is one of the takeaway messages actually from all the projects, all the collaborations. People have different definitions for innovation. Bike was mentioned, micro delivery system, again, very similar case in Synergy. So bikes did exist. This is not a new technology, right? But the business model is novel. And how we incorporate this new business model in already existing platform for city logistics, and then how we mix it with already existing, the truck, very traditional system, then this is the main question. I think we cannot if the question is not crystal clear, we cannot find the right answer. So this is one of the main takeaway messages from all those, meetings and brainstorming sessions with all sorts of stakeholders. But just to be very clear about the outcomes of the synergy related to using micro delivery services in urban area, it requires a lot of collaborations between different stakeholders, especially the city itself and the private companies. These micro delivery systems, they play on a very slim margin of maneuver for profit making. So, and also from a pricing perspective, in Europe, we don't have that much of, high ceiling that they can just play with prices. So they really need to be efficient. So when it comes to this, I would say the efficiency of those systems from Synergy project was really one of the main takeaways. So how to manage the fleet in real time to be able to, keep the consumers somehow engaged and in the system, as well as making sure that the riders are not pushed to their limits. And then, they can create also accidents for the city. So it really requires, it's an ecosystem. It's not just one single solution, innovative solution, if you will, for a very big and complex problem.
Thank you, Shadi, and that is a good point, the efficiency of the system. And then I'm also thinking about the efficient use of space, because that in dense urban neighborhoods, space is a scarce resource. And I would like to hear you, Philipp, on this, because the ASA project, you worked on what you call sleeping assets and how to activate them. So this is another term, I guess, for underused infrastructure. Could you maybe share some examples of such spaces and how they have been utilized to enhance efficiency?
Yeah, of course. I would like to sum up or pick up the points Shadi and Victor mentioned, because as you said, it's like an ecosystem, a city, and you have building bricks, in my opinion, that you can put together. And like Shadi said, what is innovative? Sometimes it's finding synergies, like you said, finding sleeping assets, like we taught it in ASAP. And we had different pillars, let's call it like this. And one was also that we had many cities involved, like Hamburg, Stockholm, and Paris, who have river access or water access. So we thought about, okay, how can we also integrate these modes of transport more into sustainable urban logistics? Because streets are overcrowded, they are filled with trucks, and they cause emissions. Also, they are causing traffic problems. And this is one of the aspects to integrate also other modes of transport. Like I said, waterways, if a city has waterways. So this is also a specific topic always. Sometimes you have a blueprint, but you have to always focus on the local context. So as I said, the waterways was one of the aspects in Paris and Stockholm and Hamburg. Looking at tram lines or train lines, if they can be activated. But Shadi and Victor mentioned it, it's always about handling the goods. Is it possible? There are also mobility solutions already in place. So this has to be kept in mind if you are talking about these kind of sleeping assets. On the other hand, was also mentioned the term AI or digitized solution. It's about also using the space that is existing already in a better way. And there were ideas about digital solutions like digital parking spots, digital parking signs, and to see, like most of the people know, if we are talking about vehicles, personal vehicles, they are mainly parked. So 80% of the time we don't use them. So they are not mobile. They are more or less like a immobile vehicle and using space for other usages. And so there was also the aspect of, can we use a certain space that is limited in a city in a more efficient way? And last but not least, this is also about time. If we are talking about off-peak deliveries, it's that in the night times, we have more solutions now. If we are talking about electric mobility, and you reduce low emissions and you reduce also noise emissions. This is also a topic where you can activate sleeping assets. And this is now last but not least, finding synergies. We've got also vehicles on the streets that could fulfill other, for example, purposes. In Stockholm, there was the example that they use vehicles to bring in parcels or to provide offices with goods. And on the other hand, this vehicle that might leave the city empty now takes waste disposal out of the city. So there are many aspects and bricks, like I mentioned in the beginning, that you can use to awake sleep in essence.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely also an innovative way of thinking, whatever we define innovative. I think also a comment on the being a good reflection, Shadi. Philipp, you also mentioned waterways or waterborne logistics as one, let's say, underutilized transport mode. Shadi, this is something that you've also used in your project. Can you share about more about that, perhaps?
Sure. So again, just to bring up to acknowledge the existence of the big pink elephant in the room. So as I mentioned about bikes, the same applies to waterways, right? So waterways are really the most traditional ways of transport by definition, historically. And now they are being revived, rebranded somehow. And then they're also, of course, they're a very nice complementary package to the already existing multimodal logistics systems, especially in urban areas. But urban areas with access to water. That's one of the points of the transferability of those solutions. Because if you have a solution that is very much tailored to a use case or a city, then it needs to be reusable and reproducible for other cities. So it sets the example. Of course, this is one of the must-haves to have access to waterways that is well connected, because eventually we need to have a full network. To have these, to make that connections. It doesn't mean that the waterway itself has to be fully connected, but then it brings yet another layer of complexity in a multimodal transport, because you do need space for transshipments. You need to allocate space to, move from one mode to the other. So in that sense, I can mention two small examples just for the sake of time. So in Synergy, I approached a very nice company in Norway, actually, that they have created these autonomous waterborne vessels. I have worked with them for years now in different projects. And then I was very much intrigued by the idea of why not using them for the sake of reallocating the fleet, macro delivery fleet, because this was one of the issues. You need trucks, again, to make these rebalancing decisions. And then so we try to tap into the idea from a conceptual perspective, how we can use those boats as moving inventories somehow, and then how we can also use them to rebalance the system. So again, they can still serve to both passenger mobility as well as city logistics to some extent. And then the other example is a very interesting one, MetaCase project that I have already shared with you. The link, probably it's already in the chat. So it's about the multimodal logistics system for waste collection. Waste is also a very traditional problem of every single city in the world. And then how we can capitalize on already existing waterways to shift trucks, because these heavy trucks are really troublemakers, and many cities such as Amsterdam in Europe, they're really moving towards car-free cities as much as possible, especially when it comes to heavy trucks. So in this project, we're really capitalizing on the already existing modes, but then, light electric fleet on the road that don't create traffic jams, coupled with waterways. And then we can really consolidate the waste and take them as much as possible outside the city outskirts. So then it can be really outside the border of the city. And then as of that point, again, we're back to trucks. And it's important to acknowledge that the world doesn't end when urban area ends. So it's really a chain, and then it propagates. If you remove trucks, they will not completely disappear. And then finding more solutions beyond that point is yet another big question.
Yeah, thank you, Shadi, and for Philipp and Victor, also for sharing some really interesting examples. Now, like moving from these solutions or pilot projects to broader implementation is essential to create this lasting impact. What would you say are the critical factors for successfully scaling up urban logistics solution? Philipp, maybe you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I think my partners already mentioned in this meeting, having like a viable business model is crucial because we, like Shadi said, always think about in the 15-minute cities, okay, this is our city, this is our short ecosystem, but you have to keep in mind we have different stakeholders involved in this process. We've got companies who want to earn money and on the other hand have a low margin oftentimes, and cities are often not for them. So they have their own transport network, they have their own processes in the in their company. So it's one knot if we are talking about one city. And on the other hand, it's also for them quite difficult sometimes. We had the example in Ullerz in Bremen or in other cities. If we want to implement a micro depot, for example, the chain gets longer. You have like a lorry or a truck who has to bring in the parcels to a certain point of handling, and then you transfer it to a cargo bike. And oftentimes you have more personal bounded to the processes, as I said, handling the product. Then you have to go by cargo bike. Then you have like a limited area. So you have to keep in mind all these different factors. And in my opinion, as I mentioned, it's a business model. Keeping in mind, is it financially viable? What are the pull factors or the push factors by the city? Are there restrictions? Is it possible? And if not, they have to also be found, the solution found also in cooperation with a city, because you can't just put in restrictions and think everything works fine. They have to be solutions found together between city authorities and also companies, in my opinion.
Thanks, Philipp. I think we will also expand on this, the importance of collaboration in between different stakeholders. But also you mentioned the city regulations and the part that they play in scaling up urban logistics. And Victor, you also mentioned a project where you specifically work with policies and governments. Could you maybe share some thoughts on how you see their role in shaping and also scaling up these solutions?
Definitely. I totally agree with that. The business model needs to be assessed since the beginning of the piloting phase. So not only that, but also the requirements and the needs of the solution or the pilot that will be developed need to be established since the beginning of the pilot. So otherwise the pilot can be a really nice idea for a pilot idea, but then if it's not a feasible case in the future, it will not be able to scale up. So the pilot ideation phase is also very important. Also having in mind the exploitation or the scaling up of the idea itself. And this comes hand in hand with the key collaborations that I also mentioned. So not only the collaboration that will be needed, but also taking into account the needs and requirements that these stakeholders will be needing along throughout the process. This GLIM project is aiming at, now that maybe some solutions are feasible, or we have some ideas in mind on what is the path that the city wants to go in terms of less pollution, green transition, etc. Now making sure that the already established businesses and small entrepreneurs can keep up with this transition, right? So now from the city perspective, they need to understand also what are the requirements of these small companies of the very different segments. So we have been talking about water management, but also so there are many different segments that have many different requirements, such as construction sites, and how these can be allocated in the future policies or regulations. And this is what the GLIM project is now establishing, these series of dialogues with the different segments of the urban logistics sector, and making sure that the regulations can include all the different sectors in the future policies.
Right, thank you, Victor. Shadi, do you have anything you would like to add on to this?
Just a quick note, probably. One is when you're talking about scaling up, feasibility is really the main question, right? So, and it's defined in many different ways, because we do have, environmental factors. We have, again, as researchers, we care about, the type of solutions, the elegance of the solutions, but then the feasibility of actually operationalizing them is a big question. And again, over the years, I have come to learn that the interpretation and perception of people from the same terminologies from different sectors are very, very different. So I think finding a common language is a stepping stone. I copy 100% what Philipp and Victor have mentioned about the business model, about engaging stakeholders, about the, these dialogues. Fully agree with them. But I think it starts probably even one step before, which is finding a common language. Even the same words, the same expressions, they mean different things. And that can actually create quite a lot of confusions as you proceed, because at the very beginning, if you have a very tilted stepping stone, then you will have a pizza in the end, instead of having a very well, established structure that would carry the pressure of, building on that stepping stone. So this is just a quick note. Sorry for the noises.
Yeah, Shadi, I just can agree with what you said, because we are all from different countries, and this is so, spectacular is a wrong expression, but it's so, as you said, it's so dependent on the language, even in the same country. Sometimes in different city contexts, you always have to look into the local context in the end, address the right persons and find the right terminology, or find the same image what you want to create. I totally agree what you said, Shadi.
All right. When talking about like this collaboration, do you have any like specific examples of how this successful collaboration between cities and other stakeholders have happened, maybe from your projects or from some other experience?
I can go first if there are no one. So yes, there has been successful, like Synergy is one of them, to be honest. We do have 5 pilots because it's a Sino-European, right? So we have Shanghai, Beijing, Singapore was an associate partner. And then in Europe, we had Copenhagen as well as Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam, it's about so we have municipality, right? So the Gemeente Amsterdam, which is the municipality of the city, as well as regional authorities and the platform like justitakeaway.com is just one of the examples, but this was the partner also in the project. So one of these food delivery systems. So it was a very success so far. It has been a successful collaboration because there is a willingness. I think it sounds very trivial, but it's not as trivial as it sounds, because there is a willingness from a city perspective to have solutions to make the bike lane safe, from the speed at which these delivery guys are riding most of the time. And also spatial usage when it comes, just they might leave their bikes in the pedestrian zone, and then that can create chaos from a city level. And they're really eager to know what are the solutions. From a platform perspective, it's also quite interesting because they also want to comply with all the sustainability rules, and then for the future, just not only their business, but they think beyond their own business. From part of that ecosystem, from one of the citizens of that ecosystem, which is a very nice, fresh perspective. And also from a regional perspective, again, how this propagates, also the deliveries, the food that comes to the restaurants, how like all these, it propagates, because there is a propagation of the disruption of anything that happens inside the urban area. So this has been quite successful so far. in terms of piloting, because the city is also willing to run pilots, which is really unique. Usually cities do not volunteer for this, but then in this case, they are really eager to see, okay, so how we can see the differences, how we can assess the impact. So I would say this has been one of the success stories so far because of the willingness.
And thank you for sharing that. Philipp, do you also have a success story?
Yeah, I think some of the successful stories from ASAP were, for example, from Vienna, in my opinion, because there's, for example, the ThinkPort Vienna. This was elaborated beforehand, also before ASAP. But for me, it's quite interesting because they have like a playing ground, let's call it like this, or an urban lab, where they've got the expertise about urban logistics, where they can bring together private companies and also the city to bring in all the different perspectives that are necessary, in my opinion, to elaborate innovative solutions, to find where are hurdles, where are potentials, and to have like an open space where they can get together, because research, in my opinion, is not always about success, but it's always, especially in urban environments, you have to say, not all, in my opinion, solutions can fly, but this has to be also elaborated in some research projects. And we have to be so, in my opinion, so communicative also about the problems in urban logistics. Shadi mentioned it, it not ends at city borders in the end. You have to look at also the supply chain across borders, and such institutes like the ThinkPort in Vienna are great opportunities to bring all the different stakeholders together. And also Martin, who is part of our project and working for ThinkPort, has a deliverable that I will share also in the chat with you about how to implement new different test beds. And he had in mind that there are different starting points. We heard about solutions that were driven by the city itself. So they say we want to be more sustainable. We want to implement, for example, city micro depot or cargo bikes, for example. Then you have a totally different point of starting point, as if you have a company who has a business model in mind, who has their own network, and who wants to roll up or roll out their solution in another city. So he made a process chain where you have to keep in mind, what did I think about, for example, my financial viable solution? Did I think about the political aspects in a local context, for example, in Vienna or in Stockholm? There are totally different aspects that have to be kept in mind, especially because the audience differs so much. As I said, these are different knots, and every urban context, in my opinion, what I've also learned about the years, differs. You can have a blueprint, but in my opinion, there always have to be adaptations made in the end.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that insight. We have Shadi, would you like to ask
to add, because it triggered me to add one more point. Sorry for the interruption. But for the companies in Europe, there's something that is called CSRD reporting. Maybe I don't know if people are familiar with it, but this is actually one of the nudges from especially for the private companies. So this is the EU's corporate sustainability reporting directive. And this is something that the companies such as that scale, like the private companies, even they need to out and they need to comply with. So that opens a little bit of the door also for these mutual conversations, because for out of the goodwill, not necessarily the profit-making companies would engage in those common activities for more sustainable cities. However, we define sustainability because, of course, economic aspect is one of them. So it's good also to navigate what are each partner's somehow motivation to get engaged into the conversation. I think that also helps to navigate the dialogues between the stakeholders.
Thank you. We've also had a comment or a question in the chat, and I also would like to remind you to share questions there. if you are wondering anything about this topic, when we do have some really good experts here that could answer to that. But the question here is, how about the citizens? We talk about a lot of different stakeholders, but can they also be considered a stakeholder? So I'm wondering, in your view, what role does the end consumer play in shaping sustainable logistics? And perhaps you can share some examples or strategies to encourage a more sustainable consumer behavior. Maybe Victor could add something, because you have a project that focused on this very specifically.
Indeed, yeah. In fact, that's another very important point to take into account. So I would maybe frame it into the consumer behavior, and here many aspects come into account, but the citizens have a very important role in this. So basically, what we are doing in Green Turn is to try to understand the consumer behavior, and for that using some behavioral interventions either in the platforms of e-commerce, mostly e-commerce, for understanding the behaviors on deliveries and returns, because that's another very important issue, that nowadays returns usually are free of charge or also very quick. So see what interventions or nudges can make consumer awareness a more important topic. So ideally, we would inform consumers of the impact that the deliveries and the returns create, and then they can make an informed decision of whatever they want to do. This is a way. So, and for engaging with them, we are, at least in this project, we are creating these user personas and profiling, and then we will survey the different countries that we have the pilots, and making sure we understand what they will be more interested in knowing, or how could we intervene to make the decisions more informed. It is also very challenging to calculate the real footprint of the deliveries, because there are many steps in the supply chain that are very difficult to calculate. But that's one of the challenges of the project and of the communication to the consumers, and not only the environmental footprint, but also social footprint. So all the workers involved in the supply chain, and how are they being involved in the deliveries and returns of this. But definitely, this is something that needs to be taken into account and addressed in the engagement of stakeholders as one of the main key ones.
Thanks, Victor. Shadi, do you have
Yes, I really like the question. I think it's a very good question. And actually, this is the main point of differentiation between logistics and passenger mobility. Because in passenger mobility, people are engaged, citizens, as you say, are engaged from door-to-door transport. You know, they are direct users of those services. These are the commodities. People are really the users of that system. That doesn't apply to logistics, because in the logistic part, people are only, like the citizens, they care about, basically, if I want to summarize it, they care about the service reliability, they care about the estimated time of arrivals, right? And they care about the convenience and the price, of course, as a general rule for the whole delivery system. But they're not engaged from door-to-door transport. So this is only about the last mile, which is not the same for passenger mobility. So that's why the focus, it's very different, because the citizens are only engaged in the last mile delivery. And I fully agree with the comments that Victor mentioned for really how to engage them in sustainable modes and so on. But everything needs to be translated into service reliability and convenience, and within a manageable range of price, because this is what they care about as users of that system. But the whole supply chain is completely beyond the a direct connection and communication with consumers. And the question is how to engage them beyond that point. So this is one of the challenges.
If I can just hop in, because it's quite interesting to hear from your perspective, and I just wanted to add some experience also from the European projects or from our colleagues now, for example, in Hamburg. It's also about who you want to address in the end from the people, because in Hamburg there was a project, it's called Rissen Bringt's. They wanted to activate elderly people to engage in e-commerce, for example, and let the bus bring the parcels to them. And for them, it was like a social event also to get to a store. So it's, yeah, in my opinion, the people itself are quite fascinating, and there needs to be more investigated in how they behave, because this is also interesting if we are talking about European projects, because you get an exchange to people from Sweden, for example, from the Netherlands, from Spain, and they see aspects that you see, for example, in your own city, completely different, because they don't sometimes understand why the people in a certain city behave like they behaved. One of the comments was, for example, from Groningen about a German city. We are using bicycles, and for us it's like the fact that it's given. And in Germany, people rely most of the time still on the vehicles, and they don't see the inefficiency in city contexts. And so there has, like Shadi said, a certain kind of alignment has to be taken place, because you have to align on the one hand the business, so the logistics part, and on the other hand you've got also the people often have like a commute from another city to another city, and sometimes you have to match also how you can match these trips, because in the end what we want, in my opinion, is to avoid trips. We don't want to double trips, and sometimes from a city perspective, in my opinion, it should be one of the main roads to avoid trips, and there you have to find synergies between logistics and personal mobility.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it seems like the role of the citizens or consumers needs to be investigated a little further, perhaps. But if we look ahead a little bit, what would you identify as the main challenges for the logistics sector in the coming years, let's say? And from your perspective, what is the biggest need for innovation or research going forward in this field? I think anyone who would like can jump on this question.
I think actually we just touched upon the topic itself, because for me, one of the remaining questions is how to, I wouldn't say educate, but maybe inform the users of the impact that these deliveries have. We see now, I don't know, maybe at least in Spain, there was there was Amazon that was saying that the logistics was almost collapsed, or they did not collapse, but they had a lot of deliveries, and that everything would be delayed because it was there was too many. So the fact that consumers are continuing increasing, not only since COVID, but after COVID, the consumption has kept on increasing, and the impact of these deliveries is maybe not fully informed to the end user, is a challenge, but also a very good point to start trying to understand, to maybe to solve one of the future impacts that this might eventually have, and also yeah, I think that's the challenge, one of the challenges that we could address.
Shadi, would you like to add something?
I was shifting gears. Philipp, go ahead if you want to jump in, please. Just a quick note, probably, and then I, of course, give the floor to Philipp. I think in general, again, based on my experience working with both sectors, if you want to divide transport into passenger mobility and logistics sector is very much of a traditionalist sector. Like there is a resistance against innovative solutions, however you want to interpret it. Like from a technological perspective, there are very limited. I always see this because in all the communications, it's always easier to engage public transport companies, or private micro mobility services. I think these type of innovative solutions, however you interpret it, had been really emerged in such a faster pace in mobility sector compared to logistics sector. And it's a very much of a traditional industry by definition. So I think there are a lot of work to be done from that side of educating the industrial part, of what are the benefits. Like if you, for example, engage in that type of innovation or research, or if we find a better solution, how much it helps. Because we do have a lot of consultancies who are providing solutions for logistic industry as a whole, supply chain, if you just, let's put them in one package. But then they are not necessarily as much engaged in direct conversations with solution providers. I think there's a huge gap. When you compare these two sectors, there's a huge gap. And I think probably we can take one step, each one of us, towards this. And I think there's a huge step that needs to be taken from that side to encourage them and engage them. And, probably there are information missing, in my opinion, because they don't see immediately the benefits. And that makes everything harder if you want to, you cannot say, okay, so first of all, acknowledge that you have a problem. And then second of all, accept that I have the solution for you. So this is very difficult to, to pitch compared to the case where people acknowledge that there is a problem and then we need to find a solution.
Yeah, just a quick side note from my side. As you said, Shadi, I liked your glimpse of history as you talked about the modes of transport, for example, waterways. It's a historian way of transport. And I totally agree. We have so many solutions in place already. And we have, like I said, built in bricks and put in new aspects, and we want to optimize all the different solutions. And on the other hand, we've got also, like Victor mentioned, some systems that are already at the edge or collapsing. And one of the terms a colleague of mine used was Wild Wild West, because everything can be done at the moment. And I think you mentioned all the problems or the challenges for the upcoming years. We've got the solutions on the one hand side, but we have to bring the people together. And for me, one of the crucial things is that we have limited resources and personnel. On the one hand side, if we are talking about the city aspect, but there needs to be more communication between private companies and also the city authorities. Oftentimes you have like a mobility contact person in the city, you've got a mobility department. SAMs are also a big issue. Of course, we've got also SARBs in place. But taking into consideration what logistics means, and Jennifer, in your introduction, you mentioned 15-minute city means that people traveling less or using other modes of transport. In my opinion, the importance of logistics is, building and taking more space in the future. And we have to take into consideration that resources also from a city authority have to be shifted to this kind of topic.
Thank you. That's a very nice, almost final reflection, because we're approaching the end of this webinar. But to wrap up, I would like to ask each one of you for a do and a don't. This is something that we always finish our urban lunch talks with. So a recommendation for both cities, research, or businesses. You can pick either one or something that address several on how to improve urban logistics. So what's one action they should definitely take, one do, and one approach that they should avoid, one don't. anyone eager to start sharing their recommendation? Yeah, go ahead.
Just go ahead, and in my opinion, I'm happy that everybody in this round, in my opinion, agrees is that you have to bring together. This is my do. Bring together the different stakeholders in some kind of environment. You have to bring in the private companies on the one hand side, because they've got the knowledge about their logistical processes. They've got their own network. They have their traditional fleet, let's call it like this, their processes. If you want to adapt this, and I don't just want to talk about logistics, because this was the main focus of today's session, but logistics, or if we talk about commercial transport, is so much more. It's also about handyman or other people who are having services in urban environments. You have to understand that from the other side. So you have to bring them together. Then you have the cities on the other hand that have a certain kind of need to be more sustainable. And on the other hand, last but not least, also us as researchers, for example, we have sometimes great ideas, but we shouldn't think of a glorified world. We just have to mirror our solutions in the end to, is it pragmatic? Is it possible? And this is my do for this round, for example, bring them all together to find solutions that work best. But in the end, we have to make compromises, because I think it won't be the Wild Wild West, like I mentioned before. We have to find solutions that work for all parties.
Thank you, Philipp, for that do and a don't. Maybe Victor, would you like to go next?
Definitely. Yeah, I think was in the same line, but bringing different stakeholders is a key to successful solutions and scaling up. But also, as mentioned, bringing citizens. I think it's going to be an increasing factor to understand what the citizens need. This has been already done in some places, just a minor comment, but from the ULATS project, we could see that the stakeholder involvement in one country was a very much ongoing tradition going on. So, for example, in the city of Mechelen in Belgium, while in Bremen in Germany, they had not had this practice as often as in the other case, and the first local stakeholder fora were a bit more complicated to organize and also to function and to gather some interesting results. So this continued stakeholder engagement is very important. And as a don't, maybe I would also emphasize the not forgetting about the business model feasibility from the start of the planning of the project or pilot.
Thank you, Victor, for the do and a don't. And Shadi.
Again, I copy 100% what was mentioned. But if I want to say a don't, I would say jumping on a solution, short-term solution, without having really, having thought about it, having a proof of concept, can really backfire. It's completely counterproductive, and we do see that quite often. Again, one of the very funny examples would be they're removing completely the paper cups from all organizations and then replacing them by so-called, we call it here in the Netherlands, billy cups, which is a plastic cup. And then they're also giving tokens, for example, you have to bring it back. And then, I did just a very quick ask around the campus. Each one of the cafes that we have, probably dozens, order every 3 months 3,000 new cups. So again, do the math. And paper was already sustainable enough because they were recycled, and we had special bins for them. It's just an example to show short-term solutions are not really if they are not done, it's better. As opposed to the case where we have a well thought through, feasible long-term solution that doesn't, backfire and creates even more damage than any good.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a good example to think about. And I hope that this discussion today has inspired some new ideas, maybe, or perspectives that you can also perhaps apply in your own work going forward. And yeah, I would also just like to thank all of our guest speakers for your participation today, and everyone else who devoted their time and to listen in today. It has been very interesting to discuss this topic with you. And if you would like to revisit some points in the discussion, I mentioned earlier, we will upload this recording on our YouTube channel. You can find a link to this in the chat as well. And we will also send this out to everyone that participated today. If you would like to receive information about upcoming Urban Lunch Talk in 2025 or other events that we have, sign up to our newsletter and also follow us on LinkedIn. There you will get the latest updates. But thank you again, everyone, for joining in today. I hope to see you all soon in an upcoming Urban Lunch Talk.